Greetings, and welcome to another episode of Reed Smith's Alumni Career Footprints podcast. On Career Footprints, we explore stories and lessons from the careers of some of our most successful alumni, with the goal of helping you find career success, whatever that means to you. I'm your host, Lauren Hackla, Reed Smith's Global Director of Learning and Development. And today I'm excited to be speaking with an alumni of our Philadelphia and San Francisco offices, Yoni Fix. Yoni is a partner at Armanino LLP, where he leads the state and local income tax practice. Before that, he spent about 8 years in Reed Smith's state tax group. Yoni, thanks so much for being here today. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Okay, let's get started because there's a lot to cover. So I'd love to start by talking about what you're doing today. You are a partner and you lead the state and local income tax practice at Armanino. For any of our listeners who might not be familiar with the firm, tell us a little bit about Armanino.
Happy to. Yeah, so Armanino is a top 20 national accounting and consulting firm with roughly 3,000 employees across the United States and India. We have a strong focus on middle market and private equity-backed businesses, and what really differentiates our firm is how closely we are to the client decision-making. So we're practical, we're fast, and we're deeply integrated across tax, consulting, technology solutions. AI is obviously front runner for us, and advisory services. And that integration allows us to help clients make real business decisions. So it's not just providing technically correct answers. And so the scale and flexibility directly shape the kinds of clients that we serve.
Yeah, so in some ways it sounds somewhat similar to being a partner at a law firm, but I'm curious to learn more about what it's like to be a partner there. So could you tell us about how you spend most of your days? You must have many responsibilities.
Yeah, so in terms of how we spend my time, so we serve thousands of clients, right? So our clients range from pre-revenue, privately held startups, all the way to large publicly traded companies, no different than at Reed Smith. Personally, I work most often with kind of the national and growth stage businesses, frankly, in all industries. We're dealing with increasing complexity across state and local tax landscape as they scale. And so we help them navigate state and local income tax issues, sales and use tax issues, property tax issues, unclaimed property, credits and incentives, from planning to structuring to audits and controversy. And then a lot of the work that we do is kind of forward looking, so preventative to some extent and opportunistic as well. So we help clients manage risk before it becomes disruptive or expensive. And in that scope, kind of the partner role becomes fairly multifaceted. I think you asked maybe kind of what are my responsibilities as a partner? Is that kind of one of the questions that you had in terms of how I break up my time, or was it something else?
Yeah, it sounds like you spend probably a lot of time working with senior folks at clients, but you must also do a lot internally managing a team. So I'd love to hear about how you manage those two aspects of the role.
Yes, in terms of the clientele that I'm dealing with, it's dealing with all the way from founders of companies to tax directors, VPs of tax, CFOs and CEOs, as well as you said, it's external facing. A lot of it is also internal facing as well. So think of our firm has about 300 partners that we do tax, consulting, variety of different services for them, audit. And so I have to serve the role of both quality risk control for all the clients on areas that I might not be necessarily hands-on, but need to be involved to provide that value add, as well as identifying additional opportunities that we can help those clients that we might be serving in one aspect of their business in tax compliance or consulting, but we can provide for more value. And so in terms of how my day breaks out, my time, it's, as I said, you have the client facing, advising, and kind of the complex high stake matters. The second part of my time really has to do with kind of practice leadership and business development. So that's about thinking strategically about growth and capability building, right? So for context, the state and local group, we have about 50 members, and a significant part of my role is making sure that our practice scales thoughtfully and as demand grows. So we expect, our team, the 50-person team, to grow, double itself in the next 5 years. So how do you do that in a manner that is not just quantitative but qualitative, right? So the people who are here have an opportunity to grow. In the meantime, we're also growing along with how fast the other parts of our business grow, but also we're complementing wherever we are potentially missing expertise, but also bringing people below our existing associates who become senior associates, who become managers, directors, and hopefully partners, right? And then finally, the third part is, which is kind of related to what I said, is kind of the developing people, right? Spending a lot of time reviewing work, mentoring, and then building confidence across the team. So it's not micromanaging, but also providing for quality support and advice along their career, which, people on my team are in various stages of that.
Yeah, thank you for that. So it sounds like advising clients directly, running the business, growing the business, and then also taking care of your people. What do you like most?
That's a good question. There's a lot of things that I like, and there's a lot of things that I like less, but they're all obviously there's no perfect role. So there's the harder parts, there's the easier parts, but that doesn't necessarily mean the hard parts are not fun. I think generally it's just building things, right? I think building a practice is one part of my new role. Other part is building trust with clients. And I use that very broadly. Clients are both the partners within our Menino, it's the directors and the senior managers and managers on those other teams that they would trust me to come in and help them grow and support their clients, as well as obviously actual external clients that are either new to the firm or have been long-term clients, helping the clients that I'm working with and the internal clients that I'm working to further build their business, right? And so the way we do that is, let's say there is a startup that is expected to be very profitable and is thinking about expanding. Before they make certain decisions in terms of where to expand into certain jurisdictions, our expertise can come in and help them identify opportunities where incentives from states can impact how many people they hire or the cost of their capital, which can have obviously significant impact on their profitability going forward and their growth. In addition to thinking through their income tax footprint and liabilities and how that will grow as they grow, those savings can mean, do we keep 50 people on the team or do we have to let go of 50 people? And that's pretty significant. That's very similar to what we were doing at Reed Smith as well, with clients from small to Fortune 50 clients. I also really enjoy building people into leaders, which I'm a work in progress. Like, I don't pretend to be perfect at my job. I think I get better, hopefully, every year. But helping people on my team evolve into those leadership roles is also pretty rewarding. And watching them grow into responsibilities that, frankly, a lot of them don't think they could handle, which is the best time to put them in them. Because if they think they should have been handling, it means they didn't get the opportunity they should have at the time. So I think that's probably a very rewarding part, seeing someone that started as an intern earn those promotions and grow into kind of a very well-rounded stay in local practitioner, whether they're have law background. We have a lot of attorneys on our team, to CPAs or people who don't have either.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's so interesting how, spending so much time with law firm partners and people at law firms, how the challenges are similar and different in another aspect of professional services. But to pick up on something you were talking about, let's rewind back to the beginning of your career and how you got where you are today. So when we were talking, you mentioned that after law school and receiving your LLM at taxation, you attended the prestigious NYU law program. You started your career at PwC in M&A taxation, and then you moved to Reed Smith. What drove that pivot?
Sure. Yeah. So out of law school, I had the opportunity to join at PwC, which is a big four accounting firm. And at the time, I thought federal mergers and acquisition tax is probably the most interesting part of tax you could be in because it just sounds interesting. Didn't really have state and local tax on my radar. And PwC, they're a fantastic firm. They gave me a lot of excellent technical foundation in that area of law and tax. But pretty early on, I realized I wanted to move closer to tax controversy work. So where obviously the stakes are high in both situations. issues are nuanced, but I was kind of craving that direct interaction with government, kind of accelerating the let's put pen to paper and see if it actually, survives a review, and where kind of professional judgment really matters and kind of interacting with that human factor, not just do I think I have the technical memo written correctly. So as I explored that shift, I was interviewing with a few law firms and I had a few opportunities, but one of my opportunities was I interviewed with Lee Zoller, who was a partner, and he was leading the state and local tax team at Reed Smith. So I came down from New York City to Philadelphia to meet with him and a few other people and went out to lunch. And it clicked pretty quickly. The way that they discuss how they approach controversy, kind of there's the technical rigor of it, but there's also this expectation that associates could develop a real point of view, right? I felt that was the right fit for how I wanted to practice, where you could come in and really make an impact and kind of drive your own career. Was very interesting, specifically with state and local tax, where there's so many different jurisdictions that you can kind of specialize in. And so Reed Smith offered me an opportunity to specialize deeply and to do controversy work at a really high level. They had excellent reputation in the state and local world, while still building kind of a broader platform around expertise, right? Like the skill sets that I thought I could gain from that team could be applied across the board in multiple aspects. So I think that combination made the decision pretty easy to pivot.
Yeah. And you mentioned specializing and working with our more junior associates. One of the most common advice that they seek is how to identify a specialty that's going to work for them and be the foundation of a career. And you had sounded like you got some great advice around that and really built a specialty. So can you tell us about how you did that?
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, I was very lucky. So when I joined, there's a few things that came into play, and it came from multiple people on the team, whether it was from Lee Zoller or from Kyle Soley, who leads the state and local team now, and senior associates and councils on the team that were in Philly as well. And the advice was, commit early to mastery, right? So like, obviously, as you said, pick an area, put in the reps, become indispensable, right? That's something you think about. And so it's kind of like the embracing the 10,000 hours of mastery mindset, right? Instead of waiting for the work to come to you where you can kind of develop that mastery over time, instead of waiting 6 years, how can I accelerate that into 3 years or less? So I knew investing intentionally early on, even with a ton of non-billable time, would compound later, and that would turn into that. So I knew that there was that compromise. But in terms of how do you identify what to invest in is hard, right? You can't just jump into, I'm a master, I know how to do this and let me sell it. The question is, do you have buyers for it? And I think for me, the way it was explained to me that really resonated, which I tell now to my interns, associates, managers, directors, is look at the landscape around you on your team. Just start there and see what type of work people do. And which part, if there's a pie chart, what accounts for a significant portion of it. And if there's a lot of people that master in it, that's great. Knowing how to do that will mean that you're useful in that perspective to them. But look at the smaller pieces of that pie chart and identify, is that area, when you look outside of your team that's around you within the four corners of the building, is it's an area of law that there's a lot at stake from a tax perspective or a dollars perspective for whatever area you're in. So the way I thought about it was, okay, let me think about which of the states are the largest. And if they're the largest, that could translate to there's a lot more tax issues. There's a lot more audience, population, there's more transactions, but also layering into it, what are the tax rates? So when I took into the highest tax rates and population, there were a few candidates in terms of states that I thought that if I put effort into it, those are material states for my clients. So it's thinking about what is a material issue that my clients are dealing with now that would be worthwhile for them dollars wise now or in the future. So if there's an area that it's moving toward, and the skill set of mastering it, once you go through it, it's not that hard to then pivot and apply that same framework to something else because the law keeps changing, the business environment keeps changing. So you could do that. And so for me, it was California. So even though I was starting my career in Philadelphia, people on the team were doing California tax work California is one of the largest economies in the world and a really high tax rate, I knew that if I focused on that, I could become indispensable in where there's a lot of work to be done. So I spent a lot of time building what the Reed Smith SALT team calls tax intelligence. And I didn't like come up with this myself. I looked around, I asked, and people were already doing it in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Massachusetts. I could see the kind of the building blocks of how they're approaching it, where it was tracking administrative developments, decisions, tracking court decisions, tracking regulatory developments, and understanding how California actually operates in practice, not just how it reads. And so I regularly started to attend California tax conferences, not just for CLE, but like to mingle with people who are in that industry, hear how they're talking about the issues, also meet people on the government side. So I can start those relationships. So when I need to, I can tap into those relationships and say, hey, I have this issue for a client. Who should I talk to? Or this is an issue that you and I have already dealt with. Having that face to face, it makes a big difference. And so I was lucky enough that partners like Lee Zoller and Kyle Soley and Dave Gutowski and Frank Ello, like we're all equity partners that like kind of, put their money where their mouth was and they actually were engaging in these activities years into their career. It was easy to imitate that. But the question is, how do you keep yourself honest? Because you could always say, I'll do that, but how do you actually do it? And so one of the things that people told me is put time on the calendar at least once a month where you are forced to present in front of people on your team. Why is that? Because then you don't want to get embarrassed, right? So I scheduled monthly California tax roundtables for people on my team. So not for everyone on the firm, just my team. And it forced me to be prepared for that. And that meeting sometimes was 15 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes, but it forced me to review what's going on in the market, regulatorily, decision-wise. So I had something to present, which gave me an opportunity to speak in front of the team, synthesize what was happening, identify opportunities. And so that can then translate very quickly to business development without me actually realizing that, because I was mastering something that could then be sold to a client and I was the natural fit to present it to the client.
I feel like that was just a master class in business development, right? You thought strategically, you got advice, then you did work, non-billable work, right, to get up to speed on that and form connections. That business development block of time once a month is some of the best advice I've heard. But it can seem, I think, for a lot of junior associates, taking that step and thinking entrepreneurial that way can seem very abstract. So if someone heard your story and said, I don't know where to start, what advice would you give them?
My advice would be take a partner or counsel to coffee on your team, someone who has risen up the ranks quickly, someone that you work with, that you respect, you think they're very smart, they seem to be on the right track, someone who was promoted recently, and kind of adopt them as your mentor and pick their brain, because it's hard and kind of just to pick the right, you know, you know, direction by yourself. Asking what you think are dumb questions are probably the best questions you can ask. Assuming you don't know the answer and going in and asking them first and not putting words in their mouth, they will share. Like people like sharing. I meet with interns of mine once a month just to talk about this stuff. And I encourage, and they kind of say, what can I do to accelerate my career? And based off of what I'm seeing in the market, because I'm facing with CFOs and CEOs, and I could tell them, hey, this is the hot next thing. You need to figure out how to use these AI tax tools to identify this opportunity in this industry. And if you run with this, I will support you and then we can go to market together. And, I'd rather have someone on my team who's fully devoted to that, because there's so much that those partners and counsels can do on their own. So I think asking a lot of questions and not being scared to do so, because if you frame it in the sense of, I look up to you, I want to be as successful as you. What can I do when I look around? What's missing? What do you think we're missing in terms of expertise on the team that you think would complement us? People give you answers.
That's really good advice. I think a lot of junior lawyers might feel like they're bothering the senior person if they ask them to coffee and ask them that question. But I think we've heard from you, a partner at your firm, that you actually appreciate that. The person's putting their hand up, thinking entrepreneurially and wanting to do something that's going to benefit sure themselves, but also the team and the partner, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think and once you have that direction, the focus should not be how do I sell the next big thing, right? It's going to take time. So it's kind of like being useful before being visible, in my view on it. It's how can I identify something that nobody really has spent the time looking into so I can, frankly, but with every minute I spend, I'm a minute more knowledgeable than everyone else on my team. And over time, it will feel more like investing in mastery than it will business development. And but the business development will just naturally follow because the people around you who are partners from hearing you can then help you. Oh, that's interesting. That case you were just talking about. If I have to dissect out of it the profile of who might benefit from if we change the facts just slightly this way, all of a sudden it's not a losing case, it's a winning case, right? So, and that's, the eyes of a senior attorney are very sharp, and they can help you identify opportunities that then you're the one that's going to lead as an associate and get a lot of opportunities that you wouldn't early on.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. All right. So we're reaching the end of our time, but I have one more question for you that just kind of brings together your role as a leader and a business developer and someone who kind of honed your skills as a big law associate. So big law is not easy, right? A lot of, we all know that time here can be, very taxing, especially if like you and also actually like me, you're in a dual big law couple. It's not an easy life. So when we were talking a couple weeks ago, you mentioned how that rigorous professional experience really kind of formed you as a professional. So what would you say to someone who's kind of struggling with the rigor? Like what did that teach you or give you that has made you so successful going forward?
Yeah, so it taught me a few things. So I think of discipline, prioritization, and empathy. So I think you learn very quickly that time and energy is finite, right? So being intentional about how you spend both your time is essential and sustainable. So one thing I did early on is treat every meeting like a client meeting. So whether or not it was a meeting with a senior associate, counsel, a partner, or a client for whether it's BD related or status check or with the government, I would prepare 30 minutes to an hour just by myself before I meet with anyone. And that's just reps, like getting in the gym, like working out the muscle memory. And by doing so over and over and over again, you learn skills how to make that more efficient. So, and by doing so early on, big law and kind of big, the cases and the meetings, there's a lot at stake. Being that prepared and frankly being over prepared then allows you to perform really well in those meetings. And then later on in your career, as you become a senior associate, counsel partner, and you're managing people and you have a lot more to deal with, you're going to have less time to prepare for those meetings. And frankly, you'll be meeting with people who should be preparing you for those meetings, right? The roles will flip. And now you know how to perform it more efficiently, what questions to ask the person on your team that should be doing all that due diligence and passing on those skill sets onto them. They don't need to. So long story short, I think big law taught me preparation leads to success. And so if you treat every meeting with every person, whether it's social, internal, external, as a client meeting, you're going to get the most out of that meeting. And that's going to turn into better quality work, long-term relationships, great sales, BD wise, and just you're going to feel more fulfilled because you're actually managing your time and achieving your goals without having to flounder around trying to reach the same result.
Well, I think that is as good a place as any to end today. That is really good advice and a really good way to think about it. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing your story. And thank you to our listeners for joining us for this episode of Alumni Career Footprints.
Career Footprints is a Reed Smith production. Our producer is Shannon Ryan. You can find our podcast on podcast streaming platforms. reedsmith.com and our social media accounts at reedsmithllp. To learn more about Reed Smith's alumni network, or if you are an alumni of the firm who wants to share your career story, contact Laura Carmatz, Reed Smith's Global Senior Director of Alumni Relations, at alumni@reedsmith.com. This podcast is provided for educational purposes. It does not constitute legal advice and is not intended to establish an attorney-client relationship, nor is it intended to suggest or establish standards of care applicable to particular lawyers in any given situation. Prior results do not guarantee a similar outcome. Any views, opinions, or comments made by any external guest speaker are not to be attributed to Reed Smith LLP or its individual lawyers. All rights reserved.